G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by Crowcast. Of course, this week we're wrapping up the Richmond Crows game that was played earlier today. A little bit of a disappointing result, but a fairly good effort by all the lads. So why don't we stop carrying on and just crack straight into it, shall we? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap, our round 11 edition of the Weekend Wrap. As I mentioned in the intro, not a great result, but not terrible by any stretch. And joining me tonight to talk all about it are my usual partners in crime, Macca. How you going, Mac?
Well, I've crawled off my sick bed and slowly getting better, mate. So I'm here.
Slowly getting better? That's good to hear.
We'll battle on, mate. We'll do well.
And Nikki, how are you going, Nick?
Unfortunately, I seem to have picked up the cold from last week.
I'll tell you what, there's a lot going around at the moment. It's a bit horrific. So many people I know or people that I work with have got it at the moment. But we're better off than they are in Victoria. So a shout out to all our Victorian friends who are currently in lockdown. Hopefully it doesn't get extended. Hopefully they get you guys back on deck as soon as possible, because I can't imagine what it would be like to be going through that again. G'day to everybody who's joined us on Discord and YouTube and maybe Twitch as well. Don't forget, Weekend Wrap is completely interactive, so we've got 8 people in the live audience there. Anyone who'd like to have their say during the course of the evening's cast, please put your hand up and get on board. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear some new voices as well. And in the meantime, why don't we just kick straight into Macca's weekend results, shall we? Because, Mac, I'd hate for you to conk out before we actually, before we actually get to your thing. So let's do it right now, shall we?
I don't know whether you're a generous man or a cruel man. I'm not sure which. Well, the first one.
Yeah.
Go for cruel. Right.
Yeah, so we had the Suns getting up over Hawthorn. That wasn't the first game. Let's go back to the beginning, shall we? We had
let's start with Bulldogs in Melbourne.
Yeah, let's go all the way back. There we are. The Bulldogs getting found out by a rejuvenated Melbourne team by 28 points. Melbourne 87 to 59.
Yeah, I think no doubt the fact that we beat them and played well against them and would have really stung their tails, and they came out with all guns firing, and Max Goulden dominated the ruck. Oliver played another absolute beauty. Petrarca helped as well. They've got a very good defence with May and Lever. And the Bulldogs, of course, they rely massively on their midfield. And there was a lot of... each side was actually trying to negate the other player's best player in the midfield. And but it went Melbourne's way more than it did the Bulldogs. And, of course, the Bulldogs don't have the same depth all around the ground as Melbourne did. And so... I really had Bulldogs as my flag favourite, and I've switched to Melbourne now, but I'm very fickle.
Yeah, look, it's a bit of a toss-up, and I don't know. Melbourne, as good as they're playing, I want to see them in the heat of the finals. They haven't played finals football for quite some time, that club. Goulden hasn't coached in the finals. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet for Melbourne, I think.
Yep.
And I think it's also the result for that game was because of what happened with the game against us, and they were getting slammed in the media. Where they were saying they looked like they didn't want to turn up or they hadn't turned up and everything else. So Melbourne were being questioned. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we got that result partly from. So whether they can back it up against another good side,
we shall see.
We'll wait and see.
Yeah. We had Geelong and Collingwood playing what was touted by many as the worst game of AFL this season by a country mile. Geelong getting up unconvincingly in the end by 10 points, 61 points to 51 points. What a disaster of a game that was.
Well, it'll certainly won't be remembered in the classic files anyhow. The Pies were goalless at half-time, 0-7. They made a bit of a charge in the second half, but they were never going to get up and win it. Grundy went down with a pinched nerve in his neck, and somehow that affected his back and his arm, so you don't want to mess with those type of things.
No.
But looking at Collingwood, I'd have to say they tried as hard as they can with the players they've got. I think De Goey is the most overpaid player in the AFL, and but they've got a couple of nice young lads. Young Poulter, who's a South Australian boy, and I wish we had got him because I think he's going to turn into a very good player.
Well, it's him and Pedler. Him and Pedler are the two comparisons, aren't they? And we haven't seen Pedler on the ground yet, so 1-0 to Collingwood on that score.
And that will be the ultimate comparison, won't it? But I think Paul's already shown that he's going to be a nice player. And the young lad, Bianco, playing his first game for the year, he played well for them. But no, look, it was a shocker to watch overall.
Yeah, what great. Let's move on. The Brisbane Lions are really starting to tick along at the moment. 129 to 65, 64 points over the Giants. That's a pretty convincing win.
Just too good. The further it went, the greater the margin. Robinson, who went from Carlton to Brisbane, he had a mighty game, an absolute superb game. You'd love to have a bloke like him on your side.
Sometimes.
If he was playing like he did on that night. 4 goals he kicked, 30 disposals, 12 tackles, easily best on ground, but very well supported by Zorko and Lions, and they've just got a more credible team all round, much more complete team all round than the Giants have. The Giants have got a midfield, and it doesn't go much further than that either way. And there's a lot of work for Giants, I think, before they become a credible force. But the Lions, they're in it this year. I'm not sure that they are quite good enough, but they're far too good for the Giants.
And then what could be the bottom 2 teams, I reckon, by the end of this season? St Kilda just getting over North by 20 points, 88 to 68. Neither team looking particularly good at all, and St Kilda just having to backpedal on their pre-season predictions or goals because they're nowhere near it.
They're a pissant team. They really are. There was a really low-quality game. I saw bits and pieces of it, and they ended up winning by 20 points, St Kilda, and there's no doubt North Melbourne, they're going to be bottom at the end of the year. The only interesting thing that came out of the game to me was Luke Dunstan, who nearly came to Adelaide as part of a manufactured trade where we would take him on with his salary, and that would have upped Brad Crouch's salary and would have got us a first rounder, and which the AFL stopped. Played his first game for the year, and he was actually BOG. He had 26 disposals and 13 handballs, so it's a pity we didn't get the guy, actually. Not much more to say about it than that.
I'm not too disappointed we didn't get him because we've got enough of those types. We need some silk. Anyway, the Suns having a cracking win over Hawthorn, 113 to 76. The Suns by 37 points there. Hawthorn must be really starting to have a think about where they're at in terms of their list, because I would have thought that whilst they didn't expect to maybe make finals this year, I don't think that would have expected to be struggling as much as they are at the moment.
Hopeless. They really are. Only saw bits and pieces of this, but They tagged Mitchell and kept him quiet, and he is the one quality player in that they've got that can knock up 40 possessions, but they kept him relatively quiet. And look, they've got so many holes in them; they look like Swiss cheese, really. And Touk Miller, who is the midfielder for the Gold Coast, he's having a superb year, and he was running rings everywhere. And the interesting thing, both Lukosius and Rankin played very well, and they looked well worth stealing for the Adelaide Crows, and I wouldn't mind getting my hands on both of them. But the Hawks are in major trouble. They've got nowhere to go, and if I was Clarkson, I'd be out of there quick smart end of the year and get myself into a club that had a chance.
We'll see how that pans out. The Bombers giving West Coast a bit of a reality check. 87-71, the Bombers 16 points over the Eagles. The Eagles having their little lull period that they often have.
Not a genuine side, are they, Fleet? West Coast. I mean, they're always...
they are on their day, but they tend to just have these patches where they just don't look convincing at all.
And that's why I say they're not a genuine team, because a genuine team, even when they get beat, they really look like they've got a bit of a chance anyhow. But they started really, really well. In fact, they jumped Essendon, and I thought getting close even to half time, with 5 goals up, and I thought this is going to be easy street for West Coast. But I like the spirit within Essendon at the moment, and they did have major injuries. West Coast. I don't know whether you saw Tim Kelly do the splits. My God, poor bastard. He looked like his wishbone being snapped in half, and he ended up with a knee injury out of it.
Mm.
I mean, it was horrible. And on top of that, Oscar Allen, he got concussion. So they were 2 down. But no, they crumpled like a concertina after half time. And Essendon ran all over them, and they got the chocolates. And I can see a future in Essendon. I think, Truck's got something to work with there.
Yeah, look, I think so. They've got a lot of pace about them. They don't have a hell of a lot of class, but they've got a fair amount of pace.
Well, Merritt and Parrish in the middle are good, and Ridley, he's good at the back, and String up forward, not too bad. I mean, they are a bit short for class, but there's something to build on there, I think.
Mm. And then we had Sydney getting up over Carlton. Carlton giving them a little bit of a fight, but Sydney getting over the line by 22 points in the end, 178.
Yeah, I only saw the last quarter, but it was all Sydney in the last quarter. And Carlton, we've said it before, where is this club really at? I mean, this is, their 6th or 7th rebuild? Not sure which one. And they're still in no man's land, and they're going nowhere. On the other hand, Sydney... and the more I watch the league, I have to go back, and I gave you credit last week, and I'll give you credit again. They do have a lot of players that have been around for quite a while, which is one of the reasons why they are going so well.
Not a bad mix at the moment for Swans.
It's a pretty good mix. It is a good mix. Nays around very strong in the last quarter.
Yep. And Port counting easily for Freo. Freo in Carlton's category, I reckon. I don't know where that club goes. Fremantle. If I was a Fremantle supporter, I'd be ropeable the way that club's been handled over the journey. But 46 points, a comfortable victory to the Port Adelaide Power.
It wouldn't be unfair to say that they've been managed the same way we've been managed, Fiend, to some extent.
We got two flags in the cupboard.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand overall, but I'm just talking about the last 2 or 3 years. When Lions was there, I thought he just turned them... Well, every club that Lions leads has to be rebuilt, and that's what they're doing at the moment.
Yeah. Yep, agree with that, Mac. He, as we've said before, he's a bit of a list killer, and he's not done them any favours, I don't think. So if we just have a quick look at the ladder, we've got Melbourne back on top, Western Bulldogs outright second, Brisbane, Geelong and Port next on 32 points. We've got Sydney on 28 points, West Coast and Richmond rounding out the 8 on 24 points. Now a clear game clear of Essendon, Giants and Fremantle, as well as St Kilda. How did St Kilda get on 20 points? Carlton, Gold Coast and Adelaide on 16 points. Collingwood and Hawthorn on 8 points, and North Melbourne bringing up the tail on 4 points. So, I mean, we've spoken previously about that top 8 being set, Mac. I reckon it just about is.
Yeah, it's looking that way, isn't it? And it'd be a surprise, put it this way, if it did alter from now on.
Well, I mean, we talked about maybe Sydney dropping out for the Giants. But Sydney look pretty comfortable. Giants haven't got a great percentage. Sydney have got a pretty reasonable percentage. I can't see the 8 changing. I really don't. I don't see it changing at all.
I think you've probably got it right. I can't see it changing.
No, so that's it. Not a terribly wonderful round of footy, and of course disrupted by COVID and venue changes, and crowd restrictions and all that sort of stuff. So let's hope for, as we said at the start of the show, for Victoria's sake and also for footy's sake, that things can get back to normal fairly quickly, and that the bloody government can actually get their shit together and get these vaccines rolled out, so that we can avoid this crap in the future.
Yeah, it certainly would help. It also would help if they build a bloody centre to put the people coming in from overseas, not inside a major city. Put them out in the country somewhere.
Macca, do you reckon that makes sense? Of course it makes sense. What the hell?
So it won't happen.
I don't know.
And it's been called for since the start.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. I don't understand. But anyway, this is not a political show. So let's not drop into that. Let's look ahead and look at the Adelaide game. But before we do, just a reminder, everyone who's in the Discord chat, if you want to have your say during the course of events tonight, please stick up your hand and we'd be happy to have you on for a chat. Also, just a reminder to those listening that if you're not a part of our Discord community, it's really something worthwhile getting around. We have a very lively game day chat on our Discord server. There's Crows chat 24/7 during the course of the week. And as just mentioned, you can get on and interact with the shows live on Sunday and Tuesday nights. Also, for those in the Discord channel, don't forget our suggestion channel there, where you can put all your genius ideas about what we should be doing on the Crowcast and what we maybe shouldn't be doing. Plenty of love for restricting your time, Macca, but I've resisted so far on that.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Just out of respect, really, more than anything else. But if you
was that a morale booster, was it?
as a genuine backhander, I think. Look,
Yeah, I think so.
No, if you do have a suggestion, get on the suggestion box channel and chuck it in. Also, if you want to support the Crowcast in any way financially, or just with sharing amongst your friends or offering your assistance in any way, there's tons of ways you can help us on the Support Crowcast channel on Discord, so go and have a look at that as well. We do really appreciate everyone who supports us, don't we, Macca and Nikki?
Certainly do.
Always.
Absolutely. Right, let's get into the Crows match, and it was not a great time. 17-9, 1-1-1 Richmond to Adelaide 12-11-83, a margin there in the end of 28 points. It was a bit of a topsy-turvy kind of game. You can see there the quarter-by-quarter scores. We got out of the gates in a mad dash and looked really good. But Richmond certainly tightened up after quarter time, got the game back on their terms, and we just lacked a bit of composure once Richmond got into gear, don't you think?
Yeah. Sorry, you want to have a crack, Nikki?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it was, and it's a little bit of what we expected from our team this year, but I think it was a little bit better because we didn't get. I mean, I think at the start of the year we all looked at this game at the MCG and thought, well, this is going to be at least a 60-point drubbing. So there's steps forwards, but there's also, and I think I said it earlier in the game day chat as like the recap of the games. To me, we can still actually clearly identify where we've got some areas to work in, but there were some really nice positives out of it. And the fact that we still fought through to the end, we're a crazy, ridiculous, stupid chance with 9 minutes to go.
Well, first 4 goals of the last quarter was a really good effort in that last quarter.
Yeah.
They could have easily rolled over and lost by, 40 or 50 points. But to get the first 4 goals in a bit of a hurry too, it gave us a bit of a sniff, and it certainly made Richmond sit up and take notice and just knuckle down for the last 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, and just I thought the game went in various stages, didn't it? And we started off in the first quarter, and when we were actually playing the game on our terms for most of the quarter, and then in the second quarter it became a little bit more mixed, but more dominated by Richmond starting to get on top with their style of game. But then in the third quarter they completely got on top with their style of game. Then at the beginning of the last quarter, as you've just said, we came out and we actually got our game going in our style, but we missed a couple of chances, and you never give a team like Richmond second chances, and of course they then steadied. And then I think as the game was drawing to a close, I think they would have drawn away again, I think, because it was just going in sort of fits and starts. And at this stage against a team like Richmond, who are really having a real crack, I don't think that we can maintain our game. I don't know how we did it all against Melbourne all game, but we just couldn't do it against Richmond today all game. We had moments when we did and we looked good, and then other moments we looked very, very poor indeed.
They're a quality outfit, Mac. As we just have a look at selection briefly, I thought selection was predictable, but I like the setup at the moment. I feel like our forward setup there with Rowe, Thilthorpe, Fogarty, McHenry, Walker and McAdam is the right mix. The only bloke there that I'm starting to worry about is Shane McAdam. He spends too much time in a game being absolutely invisible. And Shane has got to start getting himself into the game more, either offensively or at the very least defensively. But he did 2/5 of bugger all today. So I wouldn't mind betting his position might be getting questioned during the course of selection discussions during the week.
Yeah, look, he should be able to tell you who the numbers of every other opposition player, because he's always behind them. He just doesn't get in front. He's always behind. And he was not the only one that really got under my skin today. I really was very angry with Scholl.
Really, we're talking about selection right now, so let's just talk about selection.
With selection, just one thing I thought we got wrong in the back lines. I thought that Butts should have gone to the taller guy, and Murray should have gone on to Rewald. I
think they all had their turns, Mac. To be honest with you.
Yeah, Murray was just too short for the. I can't remember his name, the big double barrel thing.
Collier Davis.
Something like that. That'll do.
Yeah.
And
CJ.
You know, he was just too tall, really.
Yeah. Murray started well, but that matchup wasn't right. I agree with you. We don't have a lot in the twos, so I don't know whether Mccarthy's doing enough in the twos to really warrant selection at the moment, and Borlace probably wouldn't have been the right matchup anyway. Look, as I said, I don't think we got selection terribly wrong. I can't think of anyone out of the team that probably should have got a run. I mean, there's an obvious ongoing case for young Worrell. But I think given the result last week, it was always going to be unchanged or just forced changes. I don't think there was going to be any changes made because he would have been wanting to reward effort from last week. It was good to see Will Hamill get back in at least as the medical sub, and when he did come on for Berry, he played a couple of good minutes. But yeah, I thought, we tend to spend a bit of time on teams and matchups at the beginning of this cast, but I actually thought we matched up pretty well with them.
Well, I think your point's valid. We've only got it wrong if we miss somebody that's in the twos that should really be there, and there's nobody at the moment screaming out, "I must be in that side," and you should only get a game if you earned it. But McAdam's sort of making a case that maybe they shouldn't have to earn it to take his place.
Well, that's an interesting one because if you look at McAdam's position and what he's being asked to do, he's playing that hybrid sort of medium forward who can give a bit of X factor, but he's not providing any defensive cover at all, and he's not very effective offensively at the moment. When he does lead up at the moment, he seems to be playing for that push in the back free more than anything else. So, not terribly impressed with Shane at the moment, and the problem, I guess, is who comes in. Is it Ben Davis, or is it a different kind of player altogether? Do we play Rory Sloane up forward and maybe bring in a mid? Interesting.
Because that'd be nice, because then we wouldn't have Sloaney bombing it high into our forward line. The one player who seemed to have not taken on board of how we need to deliver to our forwards was our captain.
Well, we're talking about positions at the moment, Nick. So
I know, but I'd like to see him down there.
Yeah, well, I think he'd offer something aerially that McAdam's not offering at the moment. And I think he'd offer some defensive pressure as well that McAdam's not offering at the moment. I think one of the things that you pointed out there, Nikki, is a consequence of a bit of a lack of explosive pace on behalf of Rory at the moment. And I think he's actually struggling in that regard, which is why he's bombing the ball in high, because he's not getting any separation to be able to lift the eyes and hit up a target. So maybe a spell down forward with maybe young Berry coming in for a little bit more midfield time might be the key.
Yeah, but PJ quite rightly pointed out he won't be playing next week because he went off.
No, that's right.
So.
Yeah.
So that's probably going to save McAdam for another week. But I think that unless McAdam does something out of the ordinary next week, then just bring in anybody.
Well, I mean, we've got, as 1990 on the chat says, we got O'Connor you'd think would come in for Berry, a bit of a like-for-like type. But I think the difference between O'Connor and Berry is they're more likely to play O'Connor through the midfield rotations, and we won't see him up forward as much as Berry. So, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. They chucked Chase Jones up there for a while, and that was less than convincing. So I don't think he's an answer up there. So that spot, whether they do give Benny Davis a run, he hasn't been playing terribly off half back, mind you. NT Rabbit there mentions Haitley. He played a bit forward for Centrals. I kind of like him as a hit-up forward, but whether he's the type of player they want down there because he's a bit one pace, I'm not sure. So, interesting what they do in selection next week. Anyway, let's have a look. Oh, go on, Mac.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with you because, I think we've got a couple of problem spots, but I'm not sure that we've got the replacements for them.
We've got Braden Cook in the twos. We've got Pedlar's played a couple of games now. Whether they want to bring them in straight away or not is another thing. I don't think they will. And a couple of other players that probably were a bit whiffy today that we can talk about in a little while. But let's have a look at the header-heads, first of all. And you can see that disposal-wise, they absolutely destroyed us in terms of disposals. 390 kicks, 247 handballs to 390 disposals to 317. That's 247 kicks, 143 handballs to them, to 181 kicks and 136 handballs to us. Quite amazingly, despite that that massively overstated stat, we actually won the inside 50s, 48-50. And our disposal efficiency wasn't that bad at 71% to 78%. So Richmond, they did what they do. They spread and they spread and they spread and they just create width on the ground, and then they just do you in with a nice inside 50, don't they?
Yeah, well, that's a very good description of it, Fee. Exactly what they do. And team forfeit every time because they've got to go out there, because if they don't go and try and stop that player, because he can keep going forward as far as they like. The way they play it's a very good style, and it will always have a lot of uncontested ball in it as well. But because they also got some players who can use it very well. I mean, I'd love to have a player like Short in our side who can hit a player like 50 metres away, bang, every time. So, no, they've got a good game style, and they just keep the ball going forward. When they get up there, and if they're under pressure, they just keep it rolling forward, and that's their game style. They've got a game style. We're still trying to develop ours. We know what we want to do. We just can't do it all the time.
Yeah. Now, Mac, we've got a world record in the studio at the moment. We've got 12 people sitting there. Of course, when you're sitting in the live studio, you can listen directly to the cast. You don't have to stream it through any other means. So people catching on to that. But if any of you people in the studio want to have your say, don't forget to click the little hands up button there, and we'll get you on. Macca, it really is. These stats are really quite telling in terms of how the game was played, because our efficiencies weren't too bad, but they just don't give you the ball back, Richmond, when they've got it, do they? They don't give you the ball back. And that's what they did after quarter time. They started to possess and they started to bring other players into it. They used the ball by foot really well, and we just couldn't counter it.
No, you're 100% right. And when you think about it, in the first quarter when we were going well, we were getting the ball first, and that's allowed us to play our style of game. And once they started getting the ball first, as you said, quite rightly said, they've got their own particular game style, which means that they possess it a lot and they set it up, and when it's ready to go, then they go. And we had bursts where we did get it first. That was in the first quarter and in the start of the last quarter, but and a little bit in the second quarter, but mostly after most of the second quarter and in the third quarter. Horrible to watch. They just really made us look like mincemeat, really.
How'd you see it, Nick?
I think it was very much a case of that quality of the midfield once they got on top, and that then unfortunately showed up some of our defenders because they weren't getting the pressure, which needs to be done, and how they can bring it in. I actually thought we did quite well in that first quarter of really stopping them, using those shorter kicks as much as possible. I mean, we let them kind of do it back and forth across the defence, but then they couldn't actually get it anywhere further up the field because we had set up really well. My only fear was against a side like Richmond was, could we do it for 4 quarters? And it was showing that no, at the moment, no, we can't. And that's kind of like how I saw it. And once they got that little chip and that cross, we still got moments where we could stop them, but it just wasn't consistent enough. And that's part of being that young team.
Now, we've got Mr. PJ Crows in the chat here wanting to come on and have a say, and who are we to deny him? So, PJ, come on in and give us your words of wisdom. How are you, mate?
Hey, guys. How are we going?
Good to see you on here, mate. As Fiend said, we'll undoubtedly get some good stuff out of you, mate. So away you go.
No, you guys have been pretty much nailing it, I think. I think the first quarter was good, but Richmond sort of allowed us to play in that way. And I think last week against Melbourne, they sort of allowed us to play that possession, lower the eyes style, and they just thought in the end that they would outlast us, but they didn't. Whereas today, Richmond turned the screws in the second quarter, and we just sort of couldn't go with them, just personnel, basically.
Yeah, we lost a bit of composure, not only with ball in hand, but I think also in terms of our structure. We started to run around a bit like headless chooks chasing tail, which Richmond can do to you because they share the ball around so much, and they don't care where they are on the ground. They'll happily chip it around until they find a little opening. And through the middle of that game, particularly in the third quarter, we didn't look like we had any structure whatsoever. And if we weren't getting the ball first, then we were pretty much cooked.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of turnovers in the midfield and in our defensive half, which we weren't doing against Melbourne. And you've got to force the opposition to attack from far away from their defence, and we're just giving the ball too much in the midfield to them too easily, and they just kill you. That's why they're so good.
What do you think, PJ, that we might have been able to do, or is there? Or start again. Is there anything that we could have done, or don't we have the players and the power within those players to do it? That we could have done something different.
Yeah, I think our midfield was down. I think Laird was definitely down.
Benny Keys
and
was
I think
down.
Sloan and Keys ended up with sort of 30, but their effectiveness was sort of they were held back pretty well. And it's good to see guys like Schoenberg and McHenry sort of pushing up into those 15 to 20 possession games. But I think we look less polished because Richmond they tighten you right up and force you into error. It's just what they do. They do it to the best. So.
Yeah, I felt like Benny Keys wasn't as influential today. I felt like he was forever really under the pump. I think they played him quite well. Keys, and he's entitled to have an off game because he's been absolutely killing it all season. So no disrespect there. We look good at times when we were able to get those handball chains going. We look good. We moved the ball well. The problem is that we weren't able to regroup and reorganise when we lost ascendancy. A couple of interesting stats here, just going along with the head-to-heads while we got you on here, PJ. I wouldn't have guessed it, but we ended up winning clearances 27-40. Broke even in centre clearances, but around stoppage we were quite dominant, 14-26. And it just goes to show, Richmond, I think, are sneaky in the fact that they don't mind playing behind the ball a bit, and I think they actually did play behind us a little bit today, and they were quite happy to sweat off and just wait for the error or to get up in our faces on transition to cause turnover.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sort of points to why Rob had a pretty good game as well, is that Nankervis likes to sweat off. He doesn't play. He won't follow you around, and a lot of their tools sort of sweat off. Even their midfield and their halfbacks sweat off a bit and zone off, but they're so good that when it comes to the crunch, they're always there. But they just know their structure so well that they'll play. They're pretty happy to play off you for most of the game, and our guys are still sort of learning everything, learning how to do that. Overall, I've got to head off now. But overall, like the last 3 weeks, I think we probably penciled them in as 10-goal losses, and I think we've done pretty well. And I'm not overly disappointed, to be honest.
Yeah, agree with that, mate. Thanks very much for your support. Again, nice to talk to you, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers, guys. See ya.
Yeah, well done, PJ.
It's just that easy, guys. So all of you on Discord there, if any of you want to have a chat, have something to say, share your opinion, feel free at any stage to stick your virtual hand up. We'd be happy to have you on. Just continuing with the head-to-heads, possession count. Contested possessions was even, 132 to 134, but look at that uncontested possession count, 260 to Richmond, 167 to us. That's an astonishing ascendancy in uncontested possessions, 100 extra possessions.
Yeah, well, that's when they were toying with us in the second and third quarter, Fiend.
Yep. And, it's little wonder that we looked disorganised and looked like we were running around with chooks with our heads cut off, because that's exactly what we were. It was a classic game of piggy in the middle where we just could not actually gain any sort of proactivity in transition whatsoever. We were just chasing tail.
Yeah, we were, and they actually do. You talk about the clearances, but you think about all the clearances we had. Keys had a lot of them, and they were all under pressure, and most of them would have gone to the opposition. Most of the leads were under pressure as well, and Sloan, just when he bombs it, so turnover's always on the card. So it's not surprising that we did have the clearances, but it's also not surprising what happened in return.
Yeah, you're 100% right there, Macca, in that their clearance work was far cleaner and more effective. Our clearance work was basically get it and kick it. The amount of times I saw Sloan and Laird just kick it over their shoulders because they had no options. It certainly didn't have any system associated with it. And therefore, even though we cleared the area, it was still a 50-50 contest. And how many times did you see Richmond mark unattended sort of in that half-forward area for us and just, launch an attack from that very clearance? So those numbers are a bit misleading, really. The other stat that highlights how much Richmond were in ascendancy for large parts of the game was the time in possession, 48% to 35% time in possession for the match, Richmond, which is a very large disparity. You wouldn't expect more than about 5% difference, but to have 13% difference over the course of the match, particularly when we had so much of the ball in the first quarter, Nicky and Mac. That just shows how dominant they were in the middle part of that game. If you have a look at the marks too, marks 146 to 55. Marks inside 50, 20 to 8. Contested marks was pretty even, 14-16, but and intercepts not too bad, 69-62. But their ability to use the kick aggressively to put players into position, they only handball out of congestion. Mac, have you noticed that? I noticed that today. That it's a substantial difference to some of the other teams who use handball creatively. Richmond will kick whenever they have the opportunity to kick, but it's rarely a long bomb.
Well, they don't like to handball under pressure.
No.
But they will use handball when they've got one of those waves coming in, but they still prefer to kick if it's possible because they've often got men just totally on their own 30 metres away, so why wouldn't you? And that's what they did. And at times you could just see a wave of them coming down, and you're always going to end up with the ultimate result that they end up getting a goal. And if they don't, it's only because they kicked and missed and got a point. So
20 marks inside 50 is a telling stat. I don't think that's a reflection of our defence, to be honest with you. I think that just shows how much our midfield got broken open. Because by the time the ball went inside 50, Richmond had completely widened the ground. They'd spread out a fence. Their forwards were probably on the second or third lead, and you're on a hiding to nothing as a defender once it gets down to that. I think we did all right when the ball was kicked in high and long. Duday had a pretty good game in terms of interceptions, etc., but they were just able to spot up players at will.
Yeah, and look, and that when it comes to game plans, Richmond are playing the same game plan that's won them 3 flags in 4 years.
That's right.
We're trying to learn our game plan at the moment. Yeah. So it's for them, it's an instinct, and for us, it's something we've got to think about.
That's right. And it's not a criticism. These aren't criticisms, they're observations, because I think we all recognise that the difference, I think really the difference between us and Richmond today was probably 50 to 75 games worth of experience on average.
Yep, that'd be
per
right.
player. We're talking, as you said, we're talking about a mature, seasoned, hardened football team that's only just going, but they needed to get a wriggle on today, and they were challenged by a young team that are still learning and still getting strength in their body and tanks and all the rest of it, and they were found out in the first quarter through a higher work rate, I believe, by Adelaide. But I think that was the impetus for them to go, all right, enough's enough, we're out of the 8, we're getting headed by this team of upstarts, let's play Richmond football, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, but also in that first quarter, we actually did get our hands on the ball first, which enabled us then to be more active and more aggressive with what we want to do with the ball. And that's why we were getting goals, those first 3 goals in particular, quite easily, relatively easily against a very good team. But the minute it started to become a contest to get the ball, and we were kicking under pressure, of course, then all of a sudden we get back to the situation where we turn the ball over, and then they go back into the mode of the game that they've been playing for the last 4 years.
Exactly. And they forced us to kick long, down the lines. We weren't getting our transition going. We weren't getting that last possession in transition. So our forward entries started to become more shallow, and they were just able to clean up. So, yep, 100% right. Let's just work through the last of these. Tackles 68-53, so Essendon certainly worked their tails off. Tackles inside 50, 10-8. So, the stats are sometimes misleading, but I think the 2 key stats there was the amount of uncontested possession Richmond had and the amount of, or the disparity in the marking number, not only across the ground but also inside 50. It just showed you that Richmond were able to move the ball far more efficiently, and we just lacked composure in the end. Yeah,
and as I keep saying, anyhow, this is a very well established side, and they had a lot of their good players come back in today. I mean, wouldn't we love to have a player like Bolton in our side? Somebody with that pace that can just break up the lines, and then once he's broken up the lines, then he gets disposals of the ball. It's easy going for the rest of the players.
I know that 1990 Crow, who's just joined us on the panel, would agree with me that I wouldn't mind throwing $800,000 at Shea Bolton. He's out of contract and you want to talk about some speed and silk on the outside, there's your speed and
Yes,
silk, and
please.
I'd happily pay $800K for it.
Yeah, I love him as a player. He's going to be a real top player.
1990,
I
how you
think
going?
he's actually worth it.
I'm doing well. Yeah, definitely agree. I think Bolton's really. I think if you look at Richmond's midfield today, you could see that Bolton was just sort of running rings around us. You look at the older guys like Martin, Cochin, they were good, but it was Bolton that was the one that was doing the most damage because he was able to run away from the contest and use his speed to enable him to use his foot skills to do that little 20 to 25 metre kick that Phoenix was sort of explaining that once they get out of a contest, they're able to hold possession because they're able to use their skills to get outside the contest, and they've always got someone sort of moving in that direction so that when they actually do have the ball, they don't just turn it over. And I think our midfield's a bit same at the moment. We've got a lot of our midfield's not entirely young either. We've got Laird, Sloan, and Keys who are all sort of in that 23 to 20 or 30 in Sloan's instance age group, and I look at our list coming through underneath that, your 18 to 22-year-olds, and there doesn't appear to be anyone that's obviously going to be able to take over from them immediately, and not going to be able to provide that pace and pure foot skills that we obviously need to be able to match it with Richmond. Because I think that was the game in the nutshell today. It was the speed at the contest to enable their midfield to control the ball, which resulted in that massive amount of marks compared to us. And also, I think tackling was a bit down this week. I think they were able to fend us off.
They broke tackles a lot. You're right, mate. You're right there.
Yeah. So I think that was the game today. I think they controlled the ball. I think they were able to pierce their way with foot skills, similar to what Hawthorn have done in the past. And I think that's a class difference. And I think we've still got a way to go.
Oh, you're quite right, 99. I don't know whether I gave you one too many 90s here, but it doesn't matter if I gave you an extra one. No, you're quite right. And if it's trade or whether it's at the draft, we have to try and get two fast midfielders into our side. Guys that can get the ball but got blistering pace, because all the guys you mentioned in our midfield, you have a look at them. There is no blistering pace there at all. Whereas you look at Richmond, Cochin, he hasn't got blistering pace, and Martin, he relies on pushing everybody in the chest, etc. But he's strong. But they're not unique and they're not world beaters. But when you get somebody like Bolton just burst through with that blistering pace, all of a sudden the whole defence is out of position because of the way he's got through. And all of a sudden their forwards just can do whatever they like because he's put them all out of position. And that's what we really need, somebody like that.
Even if it's not Shai Bolton, we're going to probably going to have a high draft pick this year. Even if that's not Horn, that has to be the type that we prioritise at the draft. And I'm not quite sure it's going to be a one draft pick. So I think we've got the key pillars or the key position guys in place already. It might take one or two drafts to get those players, but I guess then the issue is that we'd have to slowly develop them as well. So it's a long game with us. It's not going to be something that's going to change overnight. I think we've just all got to be quite patient.
And you're right about that too. But take for example, you got Crouch, and then let's say Crouchy does get back in and he plays the last 2 or 3 games and plays quite well. Would you be putting him on the market and try and get yourself another first round pick to have a crack at trying to get
You're not going to get a first round pick for Matt Crouch, okay? What have you been smoking? What medication are you taking that makes you think that you're going to get a first rounder for Matt Crouch?
I'm on water at the moment, actually.
There's something in it.
No, you probably won't. But
to answer your question, Macca, yes, 100%. I'll be letting him go, and I'm pretty sure. I don't know if you've noticed in the past, the club has tended to have these little injuries to players that are in their last year of free agency for that have sort of been mismanaged, or they've got these one or two week forever injuries. I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Crouch has told the club beginning of the year that he was leaving.
Oh, you might well be right. But the only problem with Matt Crouch is, and look, he has been a good ball getter, but there's no pace, there's no destruction, there's no putting the opposition out of position, causing them great angst, because he's slow, and we've got a relatively slow midfield as it is.
He's the perfect 2012 midfielder. That when we had
I agree.
Coaching, we had Scott Camberelli, where it was full priority to win the inside ball and the clearances, and if you do that, you win the game.
Yeah,
it's not 2012 anymore. It's 2021, and Matt Crouch is not part of that.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're going to struggle to get anything more than band 3 for him on the restricted agency trade table, because it's not a lot of call for his type of player. I could see maybe a Gold Coast looking for a dour inside ball getter, maybe even a Carlton, I don't know, to try and free Cripps up a bit, but there's not much call for it now. He's playing a bygone era. The game is a lot quicker now. Players need to be more versatile. Matt only plays one position on the ground, and that's inside midfielder. And he isn't even the best at that. So I don't know about Matty Crouch, but I'm quite happy to let him go. But I don't think we're going to get huge overs for it, Mac. I really don't.
No, you're probably right.
I was going to say, we've got his replacement already in Berry.
Well, far more dynamic player, and he can play forward as well, Berry. So, and we've got Ronan O'Connor in there as well, who's inside, and Benny Keys gets his own nut, and Lukey Pedler, when he comes in, he gets his own nut. Even Harry Schoenberg doesn't mind getting his own pill either. So we got plenty of that. We don't need
Rory Laird.
Oh, and Lairdy, of course, yeah.
So there's 4 or 5 of them that are, that 175 to 185 inside mids who are getting 25 to 30 touches, and Matt Crouch he's a good player, but he's the same of what we've already got, and like we're talking about, we need that silky, speedy midfielder to put in with that mix, and he's just going to be Matt Crouch will just be taking a spot.
Yeah, well, we got Miller to come back next year, and of course he got a bit of a run through the midfielder. I still think personally he's a running halfback flanker, but he does at least give us some outside run and a little bit of silk if assuming he comes back from his injury in the same sort of nick. But there's not a lot else at the moment, and we'd be looking at this draft and maybe trade period, I think, to try and rectify that, because it's a gaping hole in our list at the moment.
Because the only player who's really showing a little bit of dash at the moment is a guy I used to belt shit out of last year, but he's doing very well this year, is McHenry. He's showing a lot of dash, right? And he actually is the type of player that can get momentum running forward by the way he's playing. And he's only just a little guy, and he's not in the same category as Bolton, but it just, even he demonstrates what can happen if you got that extra little bit of speed and extra little bit of dash, that it can get the forward line going.
I think sorry, go on, 1990.
I was just going to say, sadly, Chase Jones was going to be that ultra quick player that we were hoping would come on, top 10 draft pick. But for whatever reason, is something that's not quite happening in between the ears with Chase in that space, and I'm not quite sure we're ever going to see it.
No,
there was one little.
Go, Mac.
Yeah, I'll say Chase Jones did one of the worst passages of play I saw today. He did two handballs to people who had no chance of getting it, then eventually jumped on it himself and went for holding the ball. I thought to myself, Jesus, you really are in no man's land at the moment.
Yeah, No, and I think that really highlights Chase. I think Pete said it in the game day chat. That little passage of play tells us everything that we need to know about Chase Jones. He's a tunnel vision, straight line player that doesn't have a lot of footy smarts, and I'm sure he could forge a serviceable AFL career in a team playing that way. But he's certainly not ever going to reach, and I'm sorry to say this, I don't like talking about young players like this, but in my view, he just doesn't have the tools to fulfill the promise of a top 10 pick. And, even Ned McHenry was probably taken too high, but at least Ned is putting in, and Ned shows that he's got a bit of football brain. He likes putting players to advantage. He likes creating play, and he certainly puts in a lot of effort. So the question, I guess, with Ned is how many of his type do we need? We've got Lachie Murphy, we've got Ned McHenry, we've got Jimmy Rowe, we've got one or two others that are small and light. How many can we carry in this team?
Oh, that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, to that, Phoenix, I'd put my opinion forward, which would be that I think Ned's clearly the best of them. And there's a couple in there that I'm not 100% sure are going to make it in the long run, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Names, 90-90?
I know everyone has been quite a rap for Lachie Murphy over his 50 games. I'm just not convinced because we've been a pretty bad side for 2 or 3 years, and that's where he seemed to have gotten most of his games. But I just think his skills and his agility is just not quite there for what you need as a small forward in a top line team. So he'd be one I'd be looking to move on. Shane McAdam, I don't know what's happening to him at the moment, but he's so far off the post that he's not.
It's almost embarrassing at the moment.
It's so bad. I'm not quite. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. He can't get involved, and when he's not involved, he looks disinterested. And he's just not doing little team things, even when things aren't going for him. So he can't be getting a game next week, and I'm not sure if we should be putting a line through him.
And even Rowie was his first half was disgraceful, quite frankly, and his second half he looked a little bit more like a footballer. But we really are lacking that. Apart from McHenry, those quality smalls.
Jimmy's 50-50 for me. I think he was fantastic last week. He's clearly not quite got the fitness necessary to be a full-time AFL footballer. But if we got Burgess across from Melbourne and got a couple of pre-seasons into him and got him up to the level, I could see him quite making it in the end. But that's a 50-50 at the moment, I think.
One thing he has got is a good football brain.
Yeah, Rowe, that crumb that he took off the pack in the third quarter and then missed the sitter, that was a genuine quality crumb. Clean, one take, at his ankles. Like, it was a genuine crumb. The lad has got a ton of footy smarts, but I think you're 100% right, 1990, that he needs more zip and more core strength to be able to break through a tackle. At the moment, he's relying on trying to slip tackles high, but he needs a little bit more burst speed. So it'll be interesting to see what his program is like going forward. But Lachie Murphy, I've always thought Lachie Murphy is a tall man trapped in a small man's body, because he plays football like a tall man, and that's not what we need. And Lachie Murphy, I think, has a little bit of currency with other teams. I think he's shown over the course of 50 games that he can be a quality, lead up, small forward, whatever. But we've got too many, and I'd prefer McHenry to stay in that role than Murphy at this stage.
Yeah, we've got the nucleus of a good squad, particularly with McHenry in that space. It's just those little bits and pieces that we need to add now, and I think players like Murphy, Jake Kelly down back. These are the types that we need to be looking to upgrade. And also through the middle, what we've been talking about is these little edge pieces that need to be addressed in order to get us to that next level.
Yeah. Well, 1990, lovely as always to have you on the cast. I'll shuffle you back to your seat, and certainly if anyone else in the audience there wishes to have their say, it's just that easy. PJ and 1990 support us every week. If someone else wants to come on and have their say, then go right ahead, stick your hand up, and we'd be happy to have you on. Just reading a little bit of the chat there, we've got Finn Rollison talking about young Newchurch. He's just too far away at the moment. He's certainly a prospect for the future, but he's as light as a feather and it just goes missing for long periods of the game. He certainly has some exciting tools, but he's nowhere near it at this stage.
Just throwing one at you, Fiend. We've got the mid-year draft coming up. I think it's on Tuesday, is it? Tuesday or Wednesday? On the 2nd. So that must be Wednesday. Surely we must be looking trying to find a mid of some quality somewhere.
Well, yeah, but the question is who? Mac, I mean, it's not a mid for the sake of a mid. We need a certain type of midfielder, and I don't think there's actually many around.
Well, obviously, you would hope that they should have been scouring the Waffle, Sandful, whatever that. I think they call it the VFL now, don't they? And we've got pick number 4. And I think there's a couple of players that are definitely going to go to certain clubs in front of us. So I think the opportunity's there. I don't know whether the player's there, Fang, but that's. I'm saying that if the player is there, I think then we should be looking for it.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And look, I was going to have a bit of a chat with Pete on Tuesday night about the mid-season draft, and I was hoping to do a little bit of homework before then. So, there's a couple of blokes that are doing very well in the VFL, and there's also a couple of lads that are doing well in the SANFL as well. Do you get the player that can come in and be that outside runner out of the second tier? I don't think so. I'd almost be inclined to look for a wingman and maybe push one of our other players into that midfield role, but I don't know. I don't think the midfield draft's going to be a saviour for us, Mac.
Oh no,
not this year.
Not one thing about it being a saviour, but I was just hoping we might be able to find somebody with a little bit of pace out there.
Anyway, let's have a look at some individual stats, shall we? Because, of course, we did have some good players, notwithstanding the fact that we got a little bit torched. And we will just ignore the usual suspects for a minute and just go straight to a couple of our young guns, I think, who did really well. I thought Harry Schoenberg's game this week just went up another level. He had 19 touches, 7 kicks, 12 handballs, 3 marks, 3 tackles, kicked a point. I just felt like he was a bit more involved than he has been, and he's been growing the last couple of weeks in terms of his influence.
Yeah, look, he grows every week. I think that he's going to end up being a very good player for us, and as you quite rightly pointed out, with 19 possessions, that's a little bit of improvement week on week, and I think Nicky likes him, don't you, Nick? Are you awake, Nick?
Nick's gone
sorry.
Sleep.
No,
I'm conscious that Nicky's struggling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick, if you need to drop, Nick, if you need to drop off, then feel free because you sound terrible.
I know I do. No, who was it you were talking about?
Schoenberg.
No, no.
Yeah. Actually, I thought last week and this week he's definitely taken those steps ahead because we were lamenting a little bit of him falling away between the third and the fourth quarter at the start of the year. But he seems to have picked up that pace. And I think that earlier discussion a bit about Rowe as well and that fitness, you kind of can't, as players will actually say, you can't replicate fitness off preseason as
No.
well as you can actually during games. So I think it's beneficial to leave them in there. And actually, I think we've seen this development with Schoenberg and we've seen that development with Rowe, that they've got the pace of the game. I thought he was doing some nice evasive stuff.
Yeah.
I thought it was also a very good opportunity, and I don't think they did it to actually put him on Martin. I would have liked to have seen that happen, to say, this is what you should be like. Follow him around.
I
think
don't
you
think
might
it's
have.
the strength for Martin, to be honest.
No,
Not at this
he
stage of his
doesn't. But
career.
he has that bit of that speed and everything else to worry him a little bit, I think. And Martin, I think, is not as quick as he used to be. I think there's definitely some issues going on with his foot there. But yeah, he's definitely taken a couple of steps forward the past couple of weeks. Been really pleased with him.
Yeah, genuine inside-out midfielder. He had 9 contested possessions, 10 uncontested possessions, went at 63% disposal efficiency. Like to see him kick the ball more because he actually kicks the ball really, really well. But his handballs are often to space as well. He just turned it over a little bit today, but I think that's because he was getting involved a little bit more and trying a few things. And I think as his possession count has gone up, his disposal efficiency has just dropped off a little bit, which is to be expected. But he's getting the pace of the game. He just needs a bit of strength. He needs a tank. But I thought it was a pretty reasonable game from Harry today. Ned, sorry, go on, Mac.
I just say, I agree with you. You'll get a big tick for him,
Yeah. Ned, we've spoken about a bit already. 19 disposals, 11 kicks, 8 handballs, 4 marks, 4 tackles. Didn't hit the scoreboard, unfortunately. But you can see there a lot of work between the arcs on the tracker. His disposal efficiency also just under the 70%. 7 contested possessions, 12 uncontested possessions, turned it over 5 times. 6 score involvements, though, from Ned was pretty good. How'd you see his game?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. As I said, I used to bag the living shit out of him last year. I couldn't see a footballer in him. All I could see was an irritating little player going around, yap, and trying to push everybody around instead of getting the football. But, I think full credit to Nick. He's got him, or whichever, the line coach perhaps, he's got him just concentrating on... Yeah, got him concentrating on getting the football, and he is a good user of the ball when he gets it, and he has got some toe. I just really, really liked his game today because there were so many others that probably are more talented than him who let us down badly, and I thought that Ned showed that, even in a tough game like today, he can play well. So well done by him.
And I liked, was it him or Rowie that actually... did that kick across, took the bit of the space in the forward line and took that time to actually do a good delivery across the goals. And I'm really liking what I'm seeing from that forward mix and those younger guys down there. And Schoenberg spends a bit of time there too. So I'm really pleased with the work that Rahili's doing. The other one I thought was a really good pass. Are we going to have a chat about Tilthorpe at all?
No, maybe. Go ahead.
It was just that one kick that I really, really liked when he took the mark on the wing, quite high up defence side, and the kick that he put down there was that perfect kick. Which
I know the one you're talking about. Yeah,
was out in space in front of Sloan.
Yeah, it was a brilliant kick. Actually, it wasn't a long bomb. It was right to the advantage of Sloaney. I remember that one in the last quarter.
Yeah, and that's a great football thinking brain, and I'm loving seeing these little things that we're getting from him, to show that he's definitely earning that number 1 rough pick tag. We don't care about Ugelhagen. That's just because we want to row. He's really going to worry a lot of teams.
Yeah, so I have to agree with Nick. He's got a lot of he's got footy IQ. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Look, I think one thing that's noticeable to me is that it's our young players that tend to be the more creative. And we made mention of this in the last couple of weeks, that it's when the team sort of drops back into that long bomb style, it tends to be the usual suspects, your Sloan, your Seedsman, your Lairds, your Smith, that fall back into that. Whereas our younger players, McHenry and Schoenberg and Berry, those types of players, they seem to be more willing to continue to try and hit up those short options. So to me, it's almost like a learnt behaviour from our senior players. That's what they've always done, and it probably won't ever get coached out of them. But I like the fact that when our younger players have got their hands on the agate, they tend to want to create rather than just bail out with a long kick.
Excellent observation, Pete. Excellent observation, because it is so true. I mean, the players that have been around and played hundreds of games, they are the ones that are bombing it, and the new boys are actually trying to give it to a teammate.
And to me, what that also says is that they've been given that license to do that from the coaching staff. They've been given that license to take those risks, to make a mistake.
Is it that, or is it hasn't been coached out of them because our coaching staff no longer coach it out of them? Because that's how they're taught to play in juniors. At juniors, they're taught to play that way. And then we see, how many players have we seen stifled when they get to the Adelaide program? And we always seem to have this, long down the line stuff going on. It's this new crop associated with this new coaching panel that seem to be far more willing to run to create options on the 45 degrees. They will take the extra possession before going into inside 50. It's very, very noticeable to me.
Yeah.
And correct. Yep, definitely correct, Craig.
Let's have a look quickly at Tommy Duday. I thought he was good, particularly in the first half. Had 18 disposals, 12 and 6 marks, 1 tackle. As you can see there from the tracker, most of his ball across half-back or deep in the back half. 83% disposal efficiency was good. Only turned it over twice. 9 intercept possessions, though, which is exactly what we want. And I'm so glad, even though Nick Murray might not be the long-term answer, I'm glad that we've taken a structure that at least allows us to use Tom Duday's strengths rather than nullifying his strengths by making him accountable to a key position forward.
Yep, no comment. Yep,
right.
Yeah, no, really loved his work today. Those intercept marks, just that little confidence back. I think, you're spot on that it's with Murray. I think he was a little harshly done by a midfield, and also a bit harshly done by one particular umpiring decision. We know which one that one was. But yeah, it's really nice to see Duday back into that form, that freedom. He still gets. There was still a couple who was a bit out of position, but that's going to happen with him. The overall, what you get from him is really beneficial to our backline.
Yep. I thought Rolly O'Brien had probably his best game for the season today, both in the ruck and around the ground. He had 14 touches, 8 kicks and 6 handballs, 4 marks, 2 tackles and a goal. Did a lot of his work behind the ball too, but I just felt like he started taking a few marks. He provided a bit more presence and strength around the contest this week. 10 contested possessions. 5 intercept possessions, though, was where he really shone. I felt like the way he worked back into defence. The only time I was critical of him was in the second quarter when he didn't seem to have the breeze worked out and he kept camping under the ball. But aside from that, I felt like it was probably Riley O'Brien's best game for the season. How did you see that?
Yeah, look, I think Rage has summed it up pretty well. He says, Rob did Rob things today, and that's all we can ask. And that was probably a pretty typical Rob game, actually, when he's going quite well. So, Nan Curvis has been doing really, really well week after week. So I thought that Rob more than held his own, and he took some good marks around the ground, and as you said, at times got underneath the ball. But in terms of what he's produced in the last few weeks, that's probably his best game this year.
Yeah, yep. It's not best and fairest form by any stretch, but it's coming. It's more of what we like from him. He was far more engaged in the game.
It's the contested marks that he was actually clunking and holding them.
Yeah,
and they're just being the one grab, and we haven't seen that almost all season.
I think we need to talk about Tex because particularly in the first half, he was just a standout. For the game, 16 disposals, 10 kicks, 6 handballs, took 6 marks and kicked 4 goals, 3. At least one shot there was probably gettable. Could have ended up with 5. But until he was starved of opportunities in the third quarter, he was just dominant.
Yeah, and look, the way we've structured up forward, I love the way we've structured up forward with Ernie Fogarty and Phil Thorpe and Tex up there, and they're not in each other's way. And there's so many times that there's only actually probably maybe 2 of them down there. Sometimes there's only Tex down there. So Rahili's doing a very good job with the way the forward line moves, because when we are getting our share of the ball and bringing it in quickly, Tex is in those one-on-one situations, and he's a very, very hard man to beat. I thought that week off, he needed that week off because his form was starting to taper, but that he didn't want to have that week off, but the coaches did the right thing, and since he's come back, he's been playing outstanding footy, and the only reason why he didn't do better today than he did was not because he didn't do badly, it was the fact that we had that horrible period where he wasn't even seeing the ball. So, but he did very, very well with the opportunities that he had.
Yeah. Now we've got a new guest on the panel. First time for NT Rabbit. How you going, mate?
I'm not bad. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
We're doing well, mate. And I hope that your name is not symbolic of what's going to happen.
Oh, we'll see. You were talking about Murray before. I mean, I've got concerns about our defence all over the place. I mean, Luke Brown put in another below-the-radar awful game. We don't seem to notice him because there are so many other players to look at, especially when all the tall forwards are getting all the goals. You don't seem to notice that the small defenders have done nothing all day.
Well, I thought Jake Kelly had a bit of a howler today too, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've got question marks about most of our defenders. So Duday's really good when he's got the space to zone off, and Butts has been a great pickup. He's joining Nathan Bock and Ben Rutten in our freebie rookies who turned into fantastic defenders, but I don't understand why we're persisting with Nick Murray, because all I see is a pretty decent state league defender. He's a poor man's Hardigan. He's got nothing aside from the fact that he is the size of a key defender. At least Hardigan had his closing speed. You could always trust him to catch up with whoever was trying to run off him. He'd always get there. Murray was just left behind today all day, and he was flogged by every single opponent he was shifted onto.
It was certainly his worst game of the year.
Yeah, didn't have a good one. You were talking about Brownie. Who was the player on him that gave him strife though? NT.
I didn't actually see who he was on. He wasn't that far away from players most of the time. But at the same time, he's supposed to be providing drive out of defence. We've got so many stoppers back there. Someone has to provide the drive. And why can't Brownie, who's the one who was touted to be a potential midfielder? Where is it?
Yeah, we were saying that a week or two ago, Rabbit, that what we were lacking. And to be fair, I think Luke had a better game against Melbourne last week. He seemed to get amongst it a bit more, but you're right, he was a bit invisible again today for large portions of the game. Look, I'm not terribly concerned about our defence because I think over time that's going to resolve itself. I think the players we've got in there at the moment aren't the players that are going to end up in there. I think Murray is probably in there by default because Mccarthy hasn't really pushed in for a spot yet, and he's probably a year off being strong enough to take a key position. And we've got a couple of defenders that will be coming back through that I think over time will overtake blokes like Chase Jones and Lukey Brown, those sorts. Miller are coming back in, I think, off the half-back line will provide a little bit of run and carry. D-Mac showed why as a one-hit wonder as well today. I thought he was terrible.
And just in fairness to NT, you are right, mate. He was standing Arts, and he was chasing Arts' bum most of the time.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it is a good point at your age, mate. You are right.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add, mate, before I shuffle you back?
Does anybody want to hear me talk about Fogarty?
Go for it. I was just about to bring Fog up.
I don't think he's doing enough. He had 6 touches today with 1 contested, 3 marks, 1 contested, which was his contested disposal, and no tackles. I mean, it's nice that he can convert just about every set shot he gets, but what else is he doing? He's just as much of a black hole in that forward line as Mccarthy is. He just happens to convert every set shot he gets. There's only so far you can carry that and not have to think, is there something we could be doing better? Can we have a player who's running more, who's stopping his player from rebounding, who's getting more involved in the play across half forward and up to the wings?
Mac, what do you reckon?
Well, he's right. I can't argue with the facts. I just don't know who we've got that we could replace him with. Do you have any idea that who you replace him with, NT?
No, I don't, and that's part of the problem. We've got so many players on the list who are playing games, and you think, well, that's not good enough, but what else have we got to put in there? I'm just concerned that he's going to start getting the attitude that what he's doing is enough. I know there's a lot of supporters who think he's doing enough, but I'm worried that when we start accelerating, he's not going to be able to go with us.
Oh, your point, it's valid what you're saying, and somebody in the chat is repeating what I was always saying. I still say he's too heavy-legged. His thighs are still too thick for him to be as mobile as we'd like him to be. But I think you're correct in your call on him, but also I think you're also correct that you haven't got anybody to replace him. So at the moment, he stays there by default.
I think my thing about Fogg that probably leans towards persisting with him is, and I've banged on about it for a couple of years now, is that he's never been given free rein, and even now he's playing third fiddle in that forward line, and he's the type of player that needs to be able to lead up into space, etc. I agree. I wish he'd get Tech's numbers, 10 to 15 touches a game to go along with his 3 goals and at least 1 or 2 tackles. 100% agree. But at least he seems more engaged. At least the forward line seems to be more conducive to getting him involved. And at the end of it, I think it'll be Fogarty's position to win or lose based on what he does for the rest of the season, because I don't see our structure changing too much for the rest of the year, unforced anyway.
Well, I think that's right, because I don't think we've got anybody else to put there. And I think even NT's had to concede that while he's not happy with Fogg, we don't have a replacement. Is that correct, mate?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, what else have we got? There's Himmelberg, who's a state league player. There's Frampton, who's a state league player. I mean, they could put Worrell up forward maybe, but I don't know how well he does at the SANFL team, so I don't really catch many of those games.
Not doing well enough at the moment too.
Well, he's playing down back anyway.
So
yeah, I mean, Mccarthy's another one who I wouldn't mind seeing up forward, because I think he's got a little bit of potential up forward. The thing with Fogarty is we're so far into his career now that he's either a keep or trade. He is no use sitting in our twos. So I think that's what this year's all about with Fogarty. I think by the end of this season, we should know whether we want to keep or whether we want to trade. He's not a depth player. He's either first 22 with us or he's with another team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, but I think he'll still be with us next year.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I'd just like to see him have one hell of... He's a little bit better than he was last year, but I'd like to see him have one hell of a pre-season and get him so that he's a much more of an aerobic beast than he is, because he's really... That's I think one of the reasons why he doesn't get so many possessions, because... and he's not one that can go repeat.
Yep.
Rabbit, that's good to have. He really does need to get the repeat. But yeah, thanks for the chat, guys.
No, good to have you on board, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, NT.
All right, just touching on Darcy. So yeah, only the 6 disposals, 3 kicks, 3 handballs. Of course, those 3 kicks were goals. Contested posies 1, uncontested 5, and I mean that really does sum up when the problem is that Darcy needs the ball fed to him. Tex will go up and hit the ball up and try and make something of the play. and that shows with Tex's stats, 16 odd touches. Darcy needs the ball given to him, and we probably need Darcy to be more proactive and dynamic. I still feel like we're seeing improvement from Fogarty, but he's got a long way to go still, in my opinion.
I think that's very accurate what you just said, Pete. Both statements are correct.
Yep. All right, Nick, are you with us or are you falling off the perch?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, you poor thing. So I'll just throw a couple of names and comments up just to finish off this segment, and I'll ask your opinion. Lockie Scholl, is he due a break?
I am furious with Lockie Scholl.
Yeah.
I was spewing at him all game. That was the most stinking, cowardly game I've seen Lockie Scholl play. Seriously, he was avoiding contact, physical contact. He just didn't work hard enough. I don't know whether he's injured or whatever, but he just was not interested. I was spewing. I mean, seriously, Fiend. He played on a wing, and at times we did have a lot of things going, but he never got involved in them. He had, up to half time, he had 5 disposals. Up to three-quarter times, he had 6 disposals, and I think he ended up with about 8 or something like that. And I think that is a disgraceful game. Really, it was shocking. I would actually drop him this week, just to let him know you cannot play a game like that and hold your place.
Nikki?
Yeah, he's been struggling with the intention that they've given him. I think we've given him long enough to try and work through that, and it's not working. So he does need that little bit of a kick up the backside. But I also think, I think it was 3 games ago, one of the home game, he looked buggered in the first quarter, and was like, well, if he's tired, if he's obviously carrying something, or if he's just that little bit too sore, he needs to go back, have a rest. Even if they actually just rest him and don't play him, that might be beneficial.
Agree. Matt, I think you're being incredibly harsh on a player who's played a handful of games and is built like a twig this early in his career. He's put in some good efforts for us, and he's obviously tired and probably sore, right? So I'm not at any stage going to say that he was squibbing contests or anything like that. I think he's playing sore. I think he's playing tired. At some stages, he was struggling to raise a gallop. I think he needs a rest. I think he's had a good run of games. I'd be inclined to bring Will Hamill in either on the wing or push someone else up onto the wing and have Hamill back on half-back flank. But I think Lockie Scholl needs a rest. That's my view.
Yeah. Well, it can be exactly for the reasons that you said. I was only talking about the results. I didn't like the results.
Just being harsh, Mac. Just being harsh. Just being a grumpy old man, in my view.
No. I just called it as I saw it, mate. I just thought he didn't put in. And whether that's because he was incapable of doing it or because he was sore, I don't know. But it was certainly not the Lockie Scholl that was playing earlier in the season.
So he's under the pump. I think Shane McAdam's under the pump. You can't play a game and get 3 touches, which are all handballs, and say that you've done a good job. He's stunk it up for a couple of weeks, or for a few weeks now, McAdam. And I think he needs a reality check, because I think his work rate has dropped off, and his concentration has dropped off. I don't really know who comes in for him, but I think he just needs to come out. Even if we gift Benny Davis a game, just as a bit of a like for like, I don't know. But McAdam, for me, needs to be dropped. The other bloke, or there's a couple of others that I thought had stinkers. I thought Jake Kelly had a stinker, and I thought Chase Jones was ineffective for large parts of the game. We've spoken about those two. So, I mean, they're the blokes that I think are questionable. But whether we've got the stocks, we've got 2. We've got next week Collingwood. It's Collingwood, isn't it? Yeah. So we've got an opportunity, I think, to maybe rotate a few. I think this group has had a bit of a good stretch, a couple of hard games, Melbourne and Richmond. I think there's a few of them having a bit of a gasp at the moment, and an opportunity maybe to bring in to debut a Luke Pedler. I know he's only had a couple of games in the twos. Maybe bring in a Josh Worrell. A few people have mentioned that Josh played a lot of footy up forward as a junior, so maybe he comes in up forward. But I think it's time after 11 rounds, even though we've got the bye coming up. I think it's time for a couple of those blokes just to sit one out.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more.
There we go. Look, people saying Newchurch for McAdam really need to go and watch the SANFL game, because Tariq is nowhere near it, and you would be setting him up to be destroyed. There's no point. There is no point bringing Newchurch in. As much as I want to see Tariq, come in and do well, he's certainly not ready at this stage. Not physically, not mentally. He's nowhere near it. Nowhere near it. Anyway, we've got a couple of minutes left. If anyone wants to hop on board, don't forget, for those people listening on demand, you can join our Discord channel. The links are in the description on the YouTube video, or you can go to our YouTube channel. There's a video there on how to download, install, and join up with us on Discord. If you want to give us a support, you can go to patreon.com/AFL Crowcast. All the links to the ways you can support us are in the Support Crowcast channel. If you've got a suggestion for what we should do on the Crowcast, or something you'd like to see on the Crowcast, there's a little bit of love for a pub night, Mac. I don't know whether you get around that, but if anyone's up for that, stick a like on that particular comment in the suggestions box, and we get that one going. But final thoughts, we've got Collingwood next week. We should be able to get over them given current form. What do you reckon?
Look. One of the big factors will be Grundy. If Grundy doesn't play, although I heard that, or read that there was nothing majorly wrong with him. He was discharged from hospital, and it was a pinched nerve, and obviously they must have freed the nerve. So he probably will play. I don't think they'll be easy to beat, because they put in a lot of effort. They just don't have a lot of skill. And I think if we use our nous and try and play decent football rather than just bombing it, I think we should beat them. But when you look at through their side, they do have some good players. So I don't see it as a lay down misère. And they actually often do better on the road than they do at home.
Look, mate, you only need to be 5% off to get challenged, and anyone thinking we just cruise to a win against Collingwood, kidding themselves. Death is coming on the chat is fast becoming my favourite chatter, Mac and Nicky, because after an early indiscretion where he's questioned my suitability for video, he's really come back and he's kissing us beautifully at the moment.
Oh, good man.
All right. Well, look, what do you reckon? We might just about call that a night. What do you think?
Yep. And who are you picking, Fiend, just before we go? Are you picking us or Collingwood?
Oh, a bit early to say. I'd like to see selections, but I would expect on paper that we have the wood over them at this stage.
All right. I'll go for us too.
Make that three.
Macca, everyone on Discord, everyone watching on YouTube and Twitch, thanks very much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure to have you all along. We will see you on Tuesday night for Tuesday Night Live with Peter J, talking about Arlo Draper, as well as a little bit more on the Crows and the AFL in general. Until then, take care, everyone. If you're in Victoria, stay safe, and we'll see you on Tuesday night.
Yeah. Good night, all.
Good night, all.